Norma, can you open us in prayer, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time together. We thank you for this weekend that means so much to us as a country. And we just ask that you would just be with all the leaders, Father, and all the people that are helping us to get through these times, Father. Just give them your word and your guidance. And we ask that you would tonight help us in this study. We pray for those that help in here. And we just ask that you just be over all of us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, Genesis 47. Working our way through the last portion of Genesis. Jacob has now arrived into Egypt. Joseph has gone out and met him. And then, yeah, they're talking from here. Genesis 47. Then Joseph went and told Pharaoh and said, My father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan, and indeed they are in the land of Goshen. And he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to his brothers, What is your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, Your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. And they said to Pharaoh, We have come to dwell in the land, because your servants have no pasture for their flocks. For the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now therefore, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. Then Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your father and brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock. Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, How old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. And Joseph situated his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Then Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with bread, according to the number in their families. Now there was no bread in all of the land, for the famine was very severe. So the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed. Then Joseph said, Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock, if the money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle, the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. When that year had ended, and they came to him the next year and said to him, We will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate. Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he moved them into the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their lands. Then Joseph said to the people, Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4 fish shall be your own, as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households, and as for food for your little ones. So they said, You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day, that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, Now if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you have said. Then he said, Swear to me. And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. So ends Genesis 47. Not quite the end. Three more chapters to go.
So that's how they became slaves?
Not yet.
But that's the beginning? They sold their land. What was it?
Not the Israelites.
I mean,
The Egyptians sold their land
okay, the Egyptians, they're not talking about.
and themselves.
Okay.
So you can kind of think the Egyptians before this were all landowners. They were in charge of their own land that they had and their own cattle. And then because of this famine that came through, they had to start selling everything that they had, and basically including themselves.
So they're talking about the Egyptians.
So the Egyptians are now servants. Now, Joseph is taking care of his family. He's giving them bread based on the numbers in their family. So they aren't selling anything. They have all of their possessions that they brought from Canaan. And they are in the land of Goshen, which is the best land in Egypt. So they are multiplying and growing. The Egyptians are stagnating relatively. Pharaoh just got really rich and everything. And they still have bread available. Yeah. So why was it important to tell Pharaoh that Joseph's brothers were shepherds?
The Egyptians were an abomination to them.
Okay.
They had no upfront because they wanted to secretive was not what they were that was secretive with shepherds.
Yeah. You can think about Egyptians at this point as like, well, it is right now the greatest empire in the world at that time period. So culture is very high, artisans are really high. You know, having a job like that depicts status. So shepherding is a very lowly life. You can even think about when Jesus was born. You know, the shepherds were not looked up to very much. They had very little status as shepherds, even when Jesus was born. So this is even before that, and an empire even kind of, you know, would rival Rome at that point in time. But why else is it important to tell Pharaoh what they are? Okay, they didn't lie to him. Right? So Joseph told Pharaoh who his brothers, like who his family were. And then he went and told his family to make sure that when you tell Pharaoh, this is what you tell him, so it matches what I said. The other thing too to think about is, the land of Goshen becomes their own, and it's almost like their own little province within Egypt. And the Egyptians don't go there. But part of the reason why they don't go there is because it's full of shepherds. And they don't want to be a part of that. So it helped keep them separated away from the rest of the world. Good morning. Did you have a nice nap? No? Question number 2. When Jacob met Pharaoh, what did he do? Yeah, a little bit. Is your watch dead? It's yeah. Well, we start at 6, like we always do. That's okay. I thought maybe you took a nap. Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay. So it was feetball season. It's feetball season. Not football, feetball.
I give her that, the World Cup's not till next year. Suck it up.
So when Jacob met Pharaoh, what did he do?
Listen, bless them.
Bless you.
It says Jacob blessed Pharaoh. No?
How would Pharaoh feel about that? I mean, it, in a way, to me, someone who blesses you has some authority over you, I mean, if,
Yeah.
Pharaoh's authority, that's why he asked him how old he was.
right, I mean, if I went for a blessing, it came from somebody that had a lot more status than I do. A little more status.
Yeah, well, I mean, Pharaoh probably didn't go to Jacob
But Jacob
to be
understands.
blessed.
Right. But
Is Jacob still, I mean, could have his head cut?
Well, yeah, technically.
Pharaoh was the man.
So verse 7, right? Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. That's your information verse. But then it goes into detail what it looks like. Pharaoh has a conversation with Jacob about how old Jacob was. And then verse 10, so Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh.
I get the feeling of a mutual respect there. Pharaoh, his age was important, and Jacob was a patriarch. He was over his people.
Yeah, he's also the father of Joseph. That has a whole nother status involved as well.
Yeah. Now, see, this word, bless there is, the Hebrew word is barah. And what that means is, one of the main meanings of that is to kneel.
Okay.
So he
Yeah.
blessed him by kneeling
Okay. That
before
makes
him.
sense.
But there was more to it than what
Yeah, I mean, you can also just think about how many different people in the world can just be in Pharaoh's presence.
Yeah.
So there's not, there's not very many that have that privilege. I mean, obviously, Joseph is the escort for his 5 brothers, which I'm curious to know who he brought. which which 5 get it, and then do they think it's a blessing or a curse to be in front of Pharaoh?
They had a little grant there.
So question 3, what happened when the bread and money ran out of for the Egyptians?
Well, however you want to say it, traded or were selling their livestock. That's how they paid for the bread, and the wheat.
And their property.
Well, yeah, that kind of all came along a little bit later, but yeah, they started with the livestock.
Yeah, so it doesn't actually say like a time period for this portion, but at some point they ran out of money and they ran out of food. And so they've been buying money with gold and silver, and they don't have any more money to give, and they're hungry. So they go to Joseph, and Joseph set the rules. You need to buy with money, and we don't have any. So then Joseph says, "Give your livestock, and I'll give you bread if your money is gone." So it says it lasted them a year. That year, Joseph traded all the different types of livestock for food. But then when that year ended, they had no more livestock. Then what did they do? Then what did they trade? Their land and their. End of verse 18.
Our bodies and our land.
So all that's left is the land that they own and their own bodies. They've already sold everything or traded everything.
In my version, the Church Bible, in 15, it says, "For the money of the people of Egypt and Canaan was all gone."
Yeah.
All Egypt came to Joseph, but it never does, so I could just say what Canaan, what they did. I know that Joseph took care of it.
Canaan is another name for Israel.
Right.
Well, yeah, the land of Canaan.
The land of Canaan.
Well, it's also like, how widespread is this famine? We know it's in Egypt. We know it's in Canaan. There are other places around the Mediterranean that are currently occupied by people at this time period. But we don't know how wide the famine is. And other places, if they don't go to Egypt, they're left to fend for themselves, relatively. We know it's a very widespread famine, but we don't have documentation about how actual widespread it is. It only ever really talks about Egypt and Canaan. Obviously, the Egyptians are right there. Right? They go to the cities, they sell, trade, whatever for food. The Canaanites, like the Israelites, they had to travel there. And that took time. And if they didn't have food provided by Pharaoh, they probably wouldn't have made it. So I don't know what happened to the rest of the people in the land of Canaan. I mean, obviously, future generations, they're there. So some of them survived. So I don't know if they came down to Egypt as well, if they found other means to survive, if a lot of them died. Do not know.
Well, it's not pertinent to this conversation.
Did a little bit reading, and there were some commentaries that it doesn't specify what time period Joseph took.
Those are the,
See that. And the only person that I thought, well, you know, that would be Reuben, you know,
but he's the eldest.
but he's the eldest, so that would be the other thing, is because he was old, you know, he was older, but that's what they're thinking is, those are the possibilities of the five.
Yeah, first thing that popped in my head is basically those five.
Yeah.
They're the six eldest, not counting Judah, who
Right.
was the fourth. Or it's the reverse. It'd be like the youngest five, so they're not intimidating.
Yeah.
But those, well, we know Reuben and we know Judah
Yeah.
have families. We assume a lot of those other brothers do as well at this
Yeah.
point. So they're already like relatively established within their own, you know, they have wives and kids.
Here's the thing. If you say that the famine was widespread, you take out the miracle that God did. Totally capable of doing it. I mean, you can just have a line and famine on one side and non-famine on the other side, or whatever. We just know that we are allowed by God to know that there was a famine in Egypt, and that Joseph was over. And that's probably all that's pertinent.
Well, yeah. I mean, it says in the Bible it was a widespread famine, but widespread is a relative word.
Well, yes,
So, you know, we don't know what widespread means in that sense. We just know it's in Egypt and it's in Canaan.
Canaan in Egypt, yes.
So, question number 5, what was the rule for tax and who was under that rule?
Is that what we call it, a tax?
And that's 5%.
I mean, I just labeled it a tax, but it's kind of.
That's what it is.
I don't know what else you'd really call it.
As a tax,
It's a requirement, so it's not like an offering. And it's to the ruler, so
to the rulers for whatever land in Egypt. I got 1/5 of the produce.
1/5.
So they can work the land with your 1/5. I don't know what it is.
That's not 5%, that's 10%.
Yeah. No, we went with 5%.
probably because it had a fifth in there.
What's that?
Probably because the fifth
Yeah.
and the 5.
1/5.
So they sold all their land, right? So Pharaoh now owns
The property.
all the property, except for, yeah, he doesn't own the land of Goshen and the priests. So the priests still have their property. They probably still have most of their possessions because they have an allocated amount of bread for themselves. So they're not under the tax because this tax is based off of the property that Pharaoh now owns. So, you know, basically it's they still live on the property, they still use the property, and so the tax for the use of that property, it's like rent, is 1/5 of whatever they do. And then they get to keep the 80% of the rest to feed themselves and their families and their young ones. Well, they don't have any though. That all belongs to Pharaoh. Well, I just see that would be like, unless they somehow bought some from Pharaoh, it wouldn't belong to Pharaoh. So if there's people there that are allocated to be in charge of those flocks and they have, they generate babies and they have more flocks get bigger, it's just Pharaoh's flocks that get bigger. Yeah.
I just think straight up, they're part of the, take their profit to buy their land back, it doesn't say that.
I would say normally, yeah, but
I know we can-
following how history dictates, it doesn't seem very likely that that happened very often. Especially considering that because the famine is still ongoing, they all got moved to the big cities. And those cities really boomed for a while. And so that was part of how Egypt flourished, was because those cities boomed so big. And then after that, well, then the Israelites leave. And then we don't hear a whole lot about Egypt, except for the couple of times they try to invade Israel. And yeah, like everybody else did at that point. Okay, so last question. What was Jacob's last request? I put in quotes because technically not his last request, but it is in this chapter. But what did he want Joseph to do? Yeah, so Abraham and Isaac and their wives are all buried in Canaan. And they're together. So Jacob wants to be there. And so does Joseph. Right? When the Israelites left Egypt. Yep. The bones. yeah, I mean, after he died, there'd still be like legends of him. I mean, Jacob lived 147. I think Joseph lives like 130.
You mean that's like 50 more years?
No, the world's too polluted. And we have too many processed foods.
Too many hot dogs.
It's all the Miracle Whip you ate as a kid.
No processed foods, I like them.
Yeah.
That's what I think about when it says the guy used to live more than 100 years. It's a good
Well, yeah.
very erratic.
Well, back then they didn't have kids till they were your age. That's a weird thought.
Some people want that thought.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I agree.
Well, the world was still blessed with a perfect template back then. I mean, the flood changed all of that.
But for the most part, they were home.
I mean, Noah's the last person to live long.
It's interesting that Jacob, literally, according to this, begged Joseph for compassion to Canaan. But for Joseph, Jacob knew that whatever Joseph said, I mean, even as a father, whatever Joseph said, that happened.
Well, he was the one that had the power, but he also had the trust, and he was still probably the favorite son. I mean, also, he came to Canaan 2 years into the famine. He came to Egypt 2 years into the famine, so he had 5 years to go, and then he has 18 years after that before he dies. So if it's not actually on his deathbed, it's still like 20 years that he's been in Egypt.
So he watched Joseph the whole time he was there. So just because the famine got over didn't mean Joseph lost his authority.
No, no.
You know, but I'll say this out of my own, Joseph being a believer, and God putting up his command about honoring your mother and your father, if I was there, that's something I would have to do. Honoring your mother and father for their guiding you into whatever. That goes without being what to say in, but they did. So,
Well, that was part of their culture as well, anyway.
that'd be what I'd say, ranking one of the commandments. Well, I might not have.
But it is true, though, like, he doesn't, it's not so much a command to Joseph, it's a plea.
Verse 29 says, now as I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt. He knew that Joseph couldn't pass it off as a stupid request by his dad. And once Jacob's dead, who cares?
But it was important to Jacob to be back
But it was
into the land.
important to Jacob to honor his father.
Well, to Joseph, but
Or to
I mean,
Joseph,
like,
yeah.
Jacob knew the importance of God's promise that that's the land that we're going to own.
Didn't he purchase the land for Rachel? So it was important that they owned the land where they were buried. They actually owned the land.
Abraham bought it.
Bought the land. So it was family land. It had been purchased though.
Yeah.
And, it was in, and I don't know, I didn't get why. It's important that they owned the land for now to take.
So nobody else could come and disturb it.
If I thought, it seemed like there was more to it than that, but maybe I'm just, kind of reading into it. But it was almost, I know they mentioned it several times of the different stories coming through. Owning that land was a big deal.
Well, it was important to the Israelites, even in this day. They believed and practiced the earth to earth, dust to dust. They knew that God had made them out of dirt. And they remembered that. And that has always been part of the Israeli or Israel's custom, even back in Egypt. So they didn't just arbitrarily burn or whatever. That was considered
Yeah.
evil. They believed in burying people. And they still do.
Yeah, and Joseph responds, "I will do as you have said." And Jacob's like, "Are you sure? Swear to me. Don't just tell me. Swear to me."
Verse 31 is a very interesting verse to me. That was the dad to the son.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Now, I'm gonna share this with Joseph and his father. One thing I got tired of wanting the same stuff you want more. Stop telling me okay. I like Joseph. Stop telling me what I wanna hear and actually do it. And I do the same thing I should say here. He's trying to get at me here. You can hear all you want, but I actually said something different.
Well, and even back then, like, swearing was a big deal.
Yeah, your word was everything to people.
That was the only substance they had. So,
One must also remember that Jacob's family, because of Joseph, Pharaoh, whoever he may be or have been, held Jacob or Joseph's family not as a regular family. That was special. They were special because Joseph was a product
yeah.
of Jacob. Jacob didn't hold the same position in Pharaoh's respect, or whatever you want to call it, as the normal people in the land. You don't just give
Well, Joseph doesn't die quite yet. Got 3 more chapters. Or not Joseph, but Jacob. 2 weeks. I don't think anything's going on in 2 weeks. We've had Mother's Day and Father's Day on the 3rd week. So we should be able to do chapter 48 in 2 weeks.
You promised to be in before midnight?
In 2 weeks?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Friday.
What time?
Her plan was, as I heard, was not that she couldn't do that. Okay.
Mitch, can you close us in prayer, please?